Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
Leslie hurried home, and despite the nasty light rain and gray clouds in the sky, she was in a great mood. After work, she stopped by the doctor's office and got the wonderful news that she was finally pregnant after 7 years of marriage. For the first 5 years, she and John had not planned to become parents, having decided to live for themselves, to travel well, and then somehow it did not work out, although both were healthy and ready to add to the family. "Hi," said Leslie, going into the kitchen, where John was sitting and drinking coffee. He looked a little gloomy in his eyes. Leslie felt uneasy and goosebumps ran through her body. "Why are you like that? Did something happen?" she asked. "Sit down," he said, and Leslie obediently settled into the chair next to him. Anyway, John lowered his eyes, and after a few seconds he looked at his wife again. "Leslie, I'm sorry, but I have another one," he squeezed out of himself. It was like a thunderclap. Yesterday everything was as usual, and she did not notice changes in her husband's behavior, and today such news. Leslie was not one of those who arranged scandals and used to solve everything calmly and civilized, but now she could hardly keep herself in control. "How long ago?" she asked. "Who cares?" John dismissed her with some irritation. "She's expecting my child, and I've decided to go to her." "That's ironic," Leslie thought and smiled sadly. "I'm expecting too," she said. "What are you waiting for?" asked John with bewilderment. "I'm waiting for the baby. I just went to the doctor." Leslie took the ultrasound results out of her purse and put them on the table. John immediately took them and studied them inside, rubbing his head. "That's all we need," he said. "It's just the way it is." "John, I'm not holding you back. The baby and I can handle ourselves," she said. "But don't push pity and don't play noble," he said a little harshly. "I didn't even think about it, just informing, because the child is yours. I'll go to her anyway. I will help you, of course, money, but understand, I love her." It sounded like an excuse. "I'm not holding out. You know you do." It was certainly very bitter, painful, but Leslie said calmly, "Because the point of scandal, and you cannot hold the one who wanted to leave. I already feel like a jerk, and you're just so miserable. John, you're the one who's getting all worked up. I'm not making a scene. I'm letting you go. I'm normal. I'm just like I've always been," she said, not showing her husband how painful and bad it was for her. He looked at his wife carefully. "It seems really normal, except that a little pale, so it may be because of pregnancy," and he screwed himself up, waiting for the plates to fly at him in hysterics, which usually wouldn't arrange in such situations. She probably never loved him, since she was so calm, John thought. "Shall I go then?" he asked. "Go," Leslie replied. John slipped into the room and took the suitcase he had packed beforehand. He wanted to go to Anna even earlier, but he did not dare. Their romance lasted 7 months, and to Leslie he got used to, and it was cozy with her, comfortable, but after learning about Anna's pregnancy finally decided. But it was not by chance that it turned out that Leslie is expecting a child. When the door slammed behind John, Leslie certainly cried, but tears cannot help grief, and life goes on, especially soon she will finally become a mother. When the next day Leslie came out of work, she was very surprised to see John. "Why are you here?" she asked, waving to her colleague, with whom they left the office, merrily discussing the last date. "I was worried about you," he said, "but I see you're fine, cheerful and cheerful, as if nothing had happened. And you want me to cry and tear my hair out?" she asked. "Well, abandoned women are usually depressed, so I was afraid." "I'm not going to get depressed. There are worse dramas in life, and I have a baby to think about," Leslie replied. "That's how you live with a person. He becomes dear, his own, and suddenly in an instant everything changes, and here he is, the same person, only completely alien," she thought, looking at her husband. "The situation is certainly, you got pregnant at the wrong time," scratching the back of his head, he said. "Aya, you were involved in the process," Leslie said a little indignantly. "So you haven't gotten pregnant in 2 years, so I relaxed. All right, well, it's just the way it is. I'll help out and come once a week when the baby's born. I'm not giving up on my baby. It's definitely mine, right? Leslie opened her mouth and widened her eyes. That was a question she hadn't expected. John, are you all right? She asked in a slightly higher tone. Okay, I'm sorry, and I should file for divorce soon. Okay, she agreed. So I'm out of here then? Go. They went in different directions, and Leslie was thinking and did not notice a huge puddle on the road, along which she walked leisurely to the subway, not hearing anything around. She came to her senses only when a wave of mud pelted her from head to toe, and the guilty car was backing up. Girl, I'm honking. Are you deaf? Asked a woman in her 50s who was driving. I'm just pregnant and my husband left me. I'm thinking. Leslie answered, trying to brush a little dirt off herself. She didn't know why she said it, but it just came out of her mouth. She was brooding. If only there was someone to think about. Your husband's an asshole and there's nothing to think about. Come on, let's get you cleaned up, said the woman. I'll do it myself. I'll drive home and wash up. And where will you go like that? You'll scare everyone in the subway. Get in. Leslie thought for a while and finally got in the car. It's my fault too. I was rushing. I didn't slow down in time, said the woman. It's okay, Leslie replied. She took out a mirror from her purse and aghast, looking at her reflection. Taking a handkerchief out of her pocket, Leslie began to wipe the dirt off her face. Soon they were in a neighborhood of new buildings, and then Leslie found herself in a huge 5-room apartment with panoramic windows, a large hallway, and definitely not the cheapest furniture. Wow, what a place you have here, she said. It's not my place. The woman looked at her watch. It's fine. The landlord won't be back for a while, and Cody will be back from his tour in about 3 hours. Take off your coat and get in the tub. I'll get you a towel and a robe. Leslie didn't realize anything except one thing. This apartment was not her new acquaintances, and it was a little tense. What about the clothes? She asked. You can't wash them. You clean yourself up, and I'm going out for a little while. Where? Leslie asked, a little scared. Don't be scared. I'll take a cake, we'll have tea. And then I'll drive you home. The car is warm, so you can get there without a coat. Leslie went into the bathtub, which was the size of a room of about 15 meters. Wow, she blurted out. She looked in the large mirror hanging over the sink and was horrified. She'd scrubbed her face a little, but her hair, the collar of her sweater, everything was dirty. Then she tilted her head and looked at her jeans, and they were stained to the knee. She had to undress completely, but she only washed her head and face and washed her clothes and hung them to dry on the coil, hoping they would dry while they drank tea. Leslie heard the front door open. Well, here comes her new acquaintance, she thought, and throwing on the robe provided and wrapping a towel around her head, walked out of the bathroom. Leslie froze as it stumbled when she saw the man standing against the wall opposite the bathroom with his arms crossed over his chest. His gaze was clearly perplexed, and he was clearly not happy to see her. Who are you? Leslie blurted out, even though she knew perfectly well that the owner of the apartment was in front of her. The man was even more surprised and opened his eyes again. He obviously thought I was a glitch, Leslie concluded to herself. She'd never felt more awkward. Curious. The man said, I live here. How you got here and why you're washing in my bathroom is a mystery to me. Yeah. A woman brought me here. I was walking and she was driving and splashed me with mud, then brought me here so I could wash up. She'll be here soon. Leslie felt like a naughty girl. Where did the woman go? Asked the man. To get a cake, Leslie answered. For cake? Why the cake? Asked the man, not taking his eyes off the uninvited guest. For tea. I don't understand. The man shook his head and looked at the stranger again. Then there was the sound of the door opening, and the very woman Leslie was talking about appeared on the threshold. She had a cake in her hands, and Leslie exhaled with relief. Oh, William, what are you doing here? She asked. Actually, I live here, Mom. He answered, and his tone was very unhappy. You're not usually here so early. Take the cake and put the kettle on. She handed the box with the cake to her son, and he went out into the corridor and took it. Mom, why do I come home and a strange woman I don't know is washing in my bathroom? I was driving, she was walking. There was a puddle, I honked, but she didn't hear me. Poor thing, her husband left her pregnant. The last words the woman said in a whisper, and Leslie wanted to fall through the ground. Not only was she being spoken of in the third person, but it was so personal. She mentally scolded herself. In general, the man was upset. I hit the brakes, and the puddle is already near, so I poured it from head to toe. How could she get home like that? I couldn't take her to my place. She lived in the country, where it took more than an hour to get from her son's house. Mom, were you racing again? The man looked into his mother's eyes, but she looked away. Oh, come on, William, and stop giving me teeth. Go into the kitchen and put the kettle on. I can do that. You're the one talking down to me. He turned around and looked at Leslie, who was still standing in one place, as if she was stuck to him. Come into the kitchen, he said. She nodded obediently and went where he said, sitting down like a poor relative on a stool at the edge of the table. Her new acquaintance followed her into the kitchen. Here we are. Now we'll drink tea, and then I'll take you home, said the woman. Oh, yes? What's your name? Leslie. Why are you sitting on the side, Leslie? Come over here on the couch. It's more comfortable, said the woman, and Leslie timidly sat down, glancing at the owner of the apartment, as if looking for his approval. My name is Maria, and my inhospitable son, as you have already realized, William. And by patronymic? Asked Leslie. I hate it when they call me by my middle name. Call me Aunt Maria. And him, William, you can call him without a middle name too. Isn't he, son? William shook his head, but didn't say anything. Mom, how did you come here today? He asked a little later, putting the pieces of cake on the plates. I came on business, she answered and went to get tea glasses. What kind of business? Various things. Personal. Personal then. William grinned. Mom didn't like the city. He went to see her more often than she came here. Probably met someone on the internet again and came here for a date, he thought. Aunt Maria knew that her son did not approve of online dating, so she did not advertise her meetings with potential suitors to him. Yes, again she missed, but the woman did not give up and persistently sought her feminine happiness. Tea was poured into glasses and the cake was placed on plates. Leslie still felt uncomfortable, and Aunt Maria obviously noticed it. You drink the tea and eat the cake, Leslie, don't be shy, she said, and then turned to her son. I'll stay with you today. I don't want to go out of town at night. Stay, he replied. The main thing is that your animals did not tear up the house in your absence. They won't. Aunt Maria answered and looked at Leslie. I have 2 dogs and 3 cats, she told her. There was silence, and when the tea party was over, William looked at his watch and then at Leslie. Where do you live? He asked, and she immediately told him her address. Gather your things and I'll drive you. I can drive myself. Aunt Maria stepped in. I have to pick up Cotty anyway, so I'll drop off our guest. Leslie went back into the bathroom. Of course, her sweater and jeans weren't completely dry, but she changed quickly and took the towel off her head, which she'd forgotten about. Your hair isn't dry yet. Looking at her, Aunt Maria said, William, give the man a hairdryer. Right away, he muttered and went off into one of the rooms and came out a minute later holding a hairdryer. Leslie dried her hair and also dried her clothes a little. Ready? William asked, lacing up his shoes. Yes, she answered. This is a funny situation, said William as they rode in the car. You'll have to excuse my mom. She's a bit of a speed freak. No offense to her. It's her own fault, she was thinking. She didn't see or hear anything. Leslie answered, I'm sorry to barge in on you like this. Well, it's not your fault, although I was in shock. Imagine my reaction when I come home and there's someone in the bathroom when no one should be home. I'm waiting, and suddenly you come out. The man laughed, remembering the scene. I can imagine, said Leslie and laughed too. I've never been in a more ridiculous situation in my life. My mom made us laugh. They drove the rest of the way in silence, listening to music and thinking about their own thoughts. William stopped the car in front of Leslie's driveway and looked at the large bag in her hands, from which her dirty coat was sticking out. Keep the coat, I'll take it to the dry cleaners, he said. No need, she replied. Yes, you do. Don't even argue, he insisted. William opened the glove compartment and pulled out a notepad and pen. Here, write down the phone number. Leslie wrote and handed the pad back to him. Thanks for the ride and again, sorry for the intrusion, she said before getting out of the car. Leslie entered the apartment and walked to the window in the kitchen. The sky was gray and not even a light could be seen in the distance. She thought about today's little incident and smiled. What had happened to her now seemed very amusing and even funny, especially her condition and William's face when they bumped into each other. A few days later, Leslie called William, and in the evening, he dropped off a clean coat at her house. "Good as new," he said. "Thank you." Leslie thanked him and went back to the apartment where her friend was waiting for her, who had come to visit to support her in her time of need. She first went to the window, but William's car was no longer in sight. "Where did you go?" her friend asked her. "I went to get my coat." Leslie didn't tell her friend about her recent adventure. "I see. What are you going to do with the apartment?" she asked. Leslie and Jacob had mortgaged it together when they were married. "We hadn't discussed it yet. I hope he'll leave it to me and the baby." "Dream on. It's rare for that to happen. Probably have to share," my friend sighed. "Split it up. Then split it up. I don't want to get on my nerves about it." "That's true. Robert and I are finally ready for a house." "Good for you. Where do you want it?" "Well, we haven't decided yet. We have a few options, but we'll decide before summer. Are you coming to visit?" "Lucy, of course I will come if you invite me," answered Leslie, happy for her friend. "Of course we'll invite you. Shish kebab, you can't have a sauna. Listen, and maybe you can introduce you to Robert. You know, the one I told you about at my work." "Are you crazy? Robert who?" "Lucy, don't forget, I'm pregnant. It's not contagious. It's no problem for a normal man." "No, it's ridiculous. They marry women with babies, so what difference does it make whether the baby's inside or outside?" "Lucy wouldn't give up. I'll cast my line. If he doesn't want to, no one's forcing him. He's been looking for a long time and he can't find anyone." "Don't. I'm not in the mood for this right now," with a sad smile replied Leslie. "Just don't you dare to suffer for that bastard. He's not worth it. I'm talking about the baby, not the bastard. Toxicosis is starting, fatigue is constant. Yeah, it's not the most pleasant parts of pregnancy." Lucy remembered her pregnancy and labor and told her friend how it had been for her. Jacob called 3 weeks after the day they'd broken up and told her the apartment would have to be split in half. "Where am I supposed to live with the baby?" Leslie asked. "We'll find you a studio. I will not leave on the street, do not worry." "I'm not worried. After all, half the amount of their 2-room apartment cannot buy a studio apartment, and before the maternity to take a mortgage is not an option. She is carrying his child, and he wants to deprive her of a roof over her head." Leslie did not oppose the divorce, but could refuse to give it because she was in a position, but she didn't want to. She wrote that she agreed to the divorce and the equal division of the apartment. "Nothing to buy with this money," Leslie said with a heavy sigh, studying the real estate market with Alyona. "Yeah, what an asshole, Jacob. Who knew he'd turn out to be such a jerk?" Lucy resented him. "I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. We'll figure something out. Can't the parents add to it?" "Stuffed. Are you kidding? They're living modestly, and I've been giving them some money. I can't get another mill. I'll probably have to look at a room. I'm crazy, with a kid in a rooming house. No, that's not an option." "Then what's an option?" 2-3 weeks, I'm homeless." Leslie wanted to cry. She didn't see any way out of this situation. She couldn't go back to her parents' 1-bedroom. Maybe she could talk to Jacob. "Not half, but at least 2/3 for you and the baby. Then we'd have enough for an apartment." Lucy suggested it. "I will. Right now." Leslie immediately called her ex-husband, but the call was answered by a woman's voice, and he was very unhappy to hear Leslie. "Jacob is busy right now," he answered without hiding his irritation. "It's urgent." Leslie insisted, but the phone was ringing off the hook. "So much for talking," she said to Lucy. "What a sheep," she said to her friend. Leslie managed to talk to Jacob the next day. "Leslie, I found this studio. I'll text you the info now," he said. He did. Leslie's eyes bulged when she saw what a dump it was. "Are you kidding me?" she asked, immediately calling him back. "By the way, it's worth a little more than half the price," Jacob argued. "How am I supposed to get to work pregnant? It's half an hour to the subway if you take transit. There are several shuttle buses. I looked." "Jacob, do you have any conscience?" I almost screamed at Leslie. "It's not like I'm putting you out on the street. We're living in a rented apartment right now, and you're like a queen in a 2-bedroom. I'm thinking of moving into it, and we'll buy you that studio. It'll be easier." "Oh, yeah, it's easier for you. I've lived with you for years, and I never thought you were such a jerk." Leslie couldn't take it anymore. Anyway, don't blow your brains out and don't insult me. Either that studio or take the money and look for a place to live. Jacob muttered nervously and hung up. Let's go to the cottage. You'll have a good time. We'll get some fresh air. It's good for you, by the way, said Lucy when they met up with Tiny Eye again. I'm not in the mood, replied Leslie. It's not a bad studio after all. It's better than a room in a communal apartment, said Lucy. In itself, yes, not bad. But the commute to work, those shuttles are jam-packed, and me with a belly then in them how to ride, Leslie said, almost crying. You have to deal with problems as they come up. And at the weekend you go with us and I don't know anything, replied Lucy. At the newly acquired dacha of a friend, Lucy liked it. A good house, a plot of 13 hectares, a banya, a greenhouse, water in the house. Beauty in a word. I've had some fun. Well, Robert, as Leslie supposed, did not want to get acquainted with a woman in a position. And Leslie understood him perfectly well, and she didn't want to meet him either. She thought about William often, remembering again and again how she had come out of the bathroom in his apartment and bumped into him. For some reason, the man never left her mind. She even hoped in her heart that he would call her. But he didn't, and even so, Leslie was sure that they would meet again. She felt it on some intuitive level, and she wanted it to happen soon. When it's warm, we'll go to the lake. It's close by, Lucy said as they swam on the big garden swing. It's a nice place. It's beautiful, Leslie replied and thought again about her new home. As they drove here, they passed the neighborhood where she would soon live. The neighborhood itself is not bad, a lot of greenery, playgrounds, there is a garden and a school, and a clinic in the yard. And if it were not for the road to the subway, Leslie would be quite happy with everything. The day came when it was time to move. From the former apartment, Leslie took the couch, kitchen table, 2 chairs, dishes, new linens that they hadn't had time to use, towels, a TV from the kitchen, and a microwave and kettle, which caused displeasure on the part of Jacob's new girlfriend, judging by the fact that he called and told Leslie that she had to coordinate with him about what she wanted to take. But Leslie had just sent him away, especially since she'd taken less than half of the property, and his grumbling about the studio being worth more than the amount she was entitled to had been ignored. The conditions were somewhat high, because she had just ordered the kitchen furniture, and so far she was doing with a microwave, and the closet in the hallway was only going to order. But still she was now the owner of not a room in the communal, and a very decent studio with a meter of 35 meters, and a large wide balcony, from which you can make a room. The only thing that tormented Leslie was the distance from the subway. And here it is the first day, when you have to go to work from the new house. Leslie got off early, afraid she'd be late. At the bus stop there was already a decent number of people in line for the bus. When the bus pulled up, everyone rushed to take their seats, shoving each other. Leslie was horrified at what was happening, but she didn't risk getting on. The packed bus left, and new people kept coming and coming to the stop. I knew this would happen, she thought, glancing nervously at her watch. 10 minutes later, another bus pulled up, and it happened again. Leslie remained standing at the stop, not knowing what to do. When the third bus came, she climbed into it, hoping she wouldn't be crushed. How did you get there? Lucy asked when she called her friend at lunchtime. Terrible. I missed 2 buses, and I barely squeezed into the third. Lucy, how am I supposed to drive with a belly? I almost fainted on the ride today. You poor thing. Why don't you stay with your parents for a while? Until your paternity. In the kitchen? I don't know, Lucy. They're gonna build a subway there, but it's gonna take years to build, so I'm screwed. That evening, Leslie was dreading the ride home, but surprisingly, she even managed to get a seat. And while the minibus was waiting for passengers, the crowd was pretty big. A granny with a cart and a backpack stood over Leslie's shoulder. For a minute she sniffed, grunted, and then, apparently realizing that this method does not work, moved to action. Sweetie, didn't they teach you to give way to elderly people? You have no conscience at all. She sees an old woman standing there with her things and sits there as if she doesn't notice. The insolent one. Leslie was starting to boil. It's disgusting when you do not know the situation and let you make such words in your address. No one forced you to get on the bus with such things. You saw when you got on that there were no vacant seats. And I'm expecting a baby, and I don't want someone to accidentally elbow me in the stomach or throw up, like on you, she said. You're all pregnant at once. The grandmother muttered unhappily and twisted her head around, looking for a new victim. A woman in her 30s was sitting a little farther away, and the grandmother went towards her, trying to squeeze in front with her cart and shoving everyone with her backpack. "Could you be more careful?" Irritated, said a man standing in the way of the restless old woman, who she hit in the face with her backpack. "You have to take off your backpack in transportation." "Don't get smart, smartus." Granny snapped at him. "Give me a seat." Then she turned to the woman and snidely added, "Or is she pregnant too?" She sits, her eyes closed. Everyone is so tired, they just sit on their ass and fall asleep right away. "Would you calm down and get off the bus if you are not satisfied with something?" Another man said. "I didn't ask you, you little brat." The woman snapped at him, almost reaching her new victim. "Come on, my dear, get up. You'll be home," she said to the other one. "I've been at the operating table for almost 24 hours, so I'm not ready to stand for 5 minutes," she replied. The woman turned out to be a surgeon, and she really had a very hard day today. A scandal broke out on the whole bus because the woman raised a fuss, insulting everyone around her because no one took off from the seat, and she obviously did not plan to stand. The driver said that he would not move from the seat, and the passengers demanded to drop off the scandalized woman. Leslie felt dizzy from the noise. In the end, the nasty grandmother got off the bus, cursing everyone and everything, and it finally went. Leslie approached the bus stop, mentally tuning in to the fact that she would have to take it with the fight, as suddenly a car flew by and began to brake sharply and started backing up. This car was familiar to Leslie. "How did you get here so early, Leslie?" Aunt Maria asked her when she reached the bus stop. "Hello, I live here now," Leslie replied, smiling at the woman. "Hop on. I'll drop you off in the city." Leslie gladly accepted that offer and got into the car. "You found a place to live too," said Aunt Maria. "Or a room in the communal or here?" "The choice was not great," said Leslie. "So you divorced your husband and the apartment was divorced?" "Yeah, it's a nice apartment, even though it's a studio, but it's a bitch to get to work." "I know. I've seen how crowded all the shuttles are in the morning. It's the only way for you to get there when you're pregnant." Aunt Maria looked at Leslie's belly, which was already a little visible. "I don't know how I will continue, but I have no other options," Leslie replied sadly. "You know, it's not for nothing that we met for the second time," Aunt Maria said a little thoughtfully. "You'll stay at Williams for now." Leslie opened her mouth in surprise and looked at the woman in bewilderment. "Don't look at me like I'm crazy. My son is away on a business trip to Alaska and will be back in 3 months. The apartment is empty anyway, so why not let a good man live in it? You're a nice person, aren't you?" The woman turned her head for a second and looked at the dazed Leslie. "I guess I am," she said confusedly. "That's good. Uncomfortable. What's your son gonna say?" "I don't think he'll like it," Leslie said, coming to her senses. "I'll call him later. I'm sure William won't mind." Aunt Maria drove Leslie to work, and she went about her business, having agreed with her that she would pick her up in the evening. All day Leslie thought about Aunt Maria and her proposal. Of course she wanted to accept it because William's apartment was in the city, and the nearest subway was a 5-minute walk. But who would let a complete stranger live in their house? Aunt Maria was waiting for Leslie when she came home from work. "We'll go get your things, and then we'll go to William's apartment," said Aunt Maria as Leslie got into the car. Did he really agree? She was surprised. "Well, he saw that you are a decent girl, so why not?" "And where does your grandson live now?" asked Leslie, remembering a certain Slavka who went on an excursion. She understood that he was William's son and consequently Aunt Maria's grandson. So he moved in with his mother. She works in India for half a year at a time. That's her shift method. Half a year there, then half a year here. She came back recently, and in the summer they'll move to my country house. They drove to Leslie's house, where she quickly packed a suitcase, and then came to the 5-room house, where Leslie had already visited. "Aunt Maria, is your son a businessman?" asked Leslie, looking again at the huge apartment. "No, William is an architect. This apartment complex was built according to his design," answered Aunt Maria. "And what do you do?" "Purchasing manager," Leslie answered. "And what do you buy?" "Cosmetics, perfume. It's a wholesale company. Then we supply the big chains. I'm a hairdresser. I haven't worked in a salon in a long time. I set aside 1 day every 10 days and drive around to my clients. I'd also rent out our old apartment because William doesn't need it anymore. I can give you a good haircut because you've got a little couture on your head." Leslie hadn't had a lot of time to do her hair lately. She pulled a mirror out of her purse and looked at her reflection. Divorce and pregnancy are no reason to neglect yourself. You'll never find a decent man like that. I'm not looking for one. What kind of man am I looking for now? And who'd be interested in you with a pot belly? If you think about it that way, sure. I married Papa William when my daughter Sarah was a year old, and we lived happily together for 23 years. So you say, where is he now? That's what Leslie said. He died 5 years ago. Hard. But let's not talk about sad things. Why don't you get out of your coocher and let's get your head in order? You can't let your personal life go to waste. A child was great, but it's hard for a woman without a man. You haven't realized that yet. You haven't felt it. Leslie let her hair down, and Aunt Maria sat her on a chair in the kitchen and, taking out of her purse scissors and a comb, began to work. Well, it's different now, she said, having finished the haircut, and gave Leslie a mirror to evaluate the result. Thank you. Very nice. Leslie thanked her, looking at her new look. I'll show you the apartment and what's where, and then I'll go. Aunt Maria gave Leslie a tour of her son's apartment and showed her the room where Leslie would live. I don't know how to thank you, she said as Aunt Maria was about to leave. My parents taught me as a child that people should be helped, and if it's in my power, I'm always happy to help a good person. Aunt Maria left, and Leslie was left alone in this huge apartment. The main thing is not to spoil or break anything, she thought. You see, it's all worked out so well, said Leslie to Lucy when she called her after work and told her the whole story of meeting Aunt Maria. I've always believed that all the encounters in our lives are not coincidental. Is this Aunt Maria's son okay? Lucy asked. Nothing, answered Leslie. William was a very attractive man, at least to her taste, and thoughts of him kept coming to Leslie, especially when she passed by the bathroom in his apartment. So maybe you should look at him? Lucy continued. Who wants a woman pregnant by another man? He'd probably just snap his fingers, and there'd be a line a mile long of people wanting to marry him. Besides, he has a son, and it's not clear what kind of relationship he has with his son's mother. So check with Aunt Maria. No way. Why should I interrogate her like this? No, it's none of my business, Leslie answered. Well, you should. It's worth a shot. You don't know anything about this William thing for sure. If you did, you might get a permanent place in his mansion. Lucy. What, Lucy? You say that like it's the most important thing. Well, it's not the least important thing, especially since you're going to have to go back to the middle of nowhere. They're not going to build a subway there anytime soon, and with a baby, you can't get out of there. You can't get a lot of cab rides, and you're looking at a lot of prospects. There are no prospects. I'll manage somehow. The main thing is to bear and give birth to a healthy baby, Leslie replied. The long-awaited summer came, and on the first weekend, Leslie went to Lucy's cottage. I don't want to go back to the city, said Lucy. It's good to be a kid. She looked at her 4-year-old daughter running around the property after their beagle dog. Maruzia's staying here? Yeah, for the rest of the summer. Mom's coming tomorrow morning, and the 3 of them are gonna have a blast. You're keeping the animal too? Leslie looked at their dog. Sure. He's better off here than in the city in an apartment. Leslie agreed with her friend. It was really cool to live in a country house. She would not have refused to live like that, but she had no country house. Aunt Maria came to Leslie's house on Saturday to tell her the good news. She'd gotten her a doctor's note, and Leslie would be on sick leave for the rest of the month. Aunt Maria, you're just my good fairy, said Leslie. She was very grateful to this woman who does so much for her a complete stranger. Now it remains to send you to the ball and find a prince. Aunt Maria replied with a cheerful smile. And how are you doing with princes? Asked Leslie. Aunt Maria had told her several times about dating men from the dating site. It's kind of lame. Princes in words, but nothing in deed. Maybe we should take a break. Why don't I set you up with my uncle? Suddenly Leslie suggested. Why didn't she think of that before? He's about the same age as Aunt Maria. Ex-military widower. He's been single for 3 years, but he's not averse to settling down. Who's the uncle? Aunt Maria asked, and Leslie noticed the interest in the woman's eyes. She told all about Uncle Steve and showed his pictures that were in her phone. You have an uncle like that and you kept quiet? Aunt Maria asked. When? Well, I can at least call him today and we'll decide. Call him. We can organize a picnic at my dacha this weekend. I invite both you and Uncle. Leslie immediately called her relative, and he hesitated a bit, but finally agreed to meet. He's a little shy, Leslie said when she finished talking to him. "Oh, that's so cute." Dreamily sighing, Aunt Maria replied. Leslie was glad that she could do something for this wonderful woman. What was Leslie's surprise when she realized that Aunt Maria's cottage was in the same gardening area as Lucy's new cottage, only a little higher up and closer to the woods. It really is a small world, she thought. Aunt Maria greeted her and Uncle Steve in full dress, and the table in the house was bursting with all sorts of treats. Leslie was surprised that Aunt Maria was acting differently today, as if she had turned from a hurricane into a calm, and that she had a shy blush on her cheeks at times. That there was a spark between Aunt Maria and her Uncle Leslie noticed. She watched them both closely, and it seemed to her that they were just perfect for each other. They were a month away from giving birth. She moved into her studio as soon as she moved out of William's apartment, occasionally visiting Lucy's cottage and Aunt Maria and Uncle Steve, who were having an affair and moving in quickly. Aunt Maria didn't want to live in the city, and he didn't mind living in the country at all. "Oh, Tanechka, I told you there are no chance meetings in life. Thank you for Steve. Now I owe you one," said Aunt Maria as they drank tea in her house and Steve went out to the store. "Oh, come on. You've done so much for me already, Aunt Maria, so no debt," Leslie objected. "No, you helped me find womanhood, so I'll help you find it too." "And where will I find it, Aunt Maria?" Leslie sighed and smiled a little. "Well, I don't know that yet. It's sometimes there, but we can't see it," Aunt Maria said thoughtfully and a little mysteriously. "Does your ex call? Is he interested in your health? Does he give you money?" "No, he called once during all this time, asked me how I was doing. It was just for show, but he doesn't really care about me. He's already got a son, new wife, new family. He doesn't give me any money. The baby hasn't been born yet, so it's too early for alimony. I can't understand how it's possible. One child he's going to raise, and the other is like a stranger's uncle. A jerk is a jerk. Let's not talk about him. Steve's coming from the store, and we'll bake my special berry pie." Aunt Maria smiled. "Let's go pick some berries." They left the house and Aunt Maria handed Leslie a small plastic bowl. "Leslie, you're staying with us tomorrow, too, aren't you?" she asked. "Well, I was going home. My friend and her family are leaving the cottage today, and I thought I'd take the car with them. William is coming tonight, and tomorrow night he'll be back in town. You can go with him." Aunt Maria said, "We'll bring my granddaughter, my favorite, at last. I've missed him. I'll introduce you at last." "Okay," agreed Leslie. She was curious, but she was too shy to ask whether William was divorced from the mother of his son or not. After all, it was strange that she was the one living in his apartment and not the one with her son. The pie was still in the oven, soaking the house with the flavor of muffins and strawberries, when the car honked and Uncle Steve went to open the gate. Leslie didn't know how to bake, but she memorized the recipe while she was helping Aunt Marie. The aroma around her almost made her drool, and she couldn't wait to taste the pie. Soon voices were heard and the front door swung open. The first to run into the kitchen was a boy about 7, 8 years old, the same Cody that Leslie had heard about many times, and today she finally saw him. "My bunny's here." Aunt Maria hugged the boy and kissed him on the top of his head. "Grandma, I missed you," he said. "I missed you too. Leslie and I baked my specialty cake. 10 more minutes and we'll be having tea." Cody turned and looked at Leslie and then back at Grandma. "Who's that?" he asked. "And this is Leslie, Uncle Steve's niece and a good friend of mine." Cody walked over to Leslie and extended his hand to her. "Cody." He introduced himself. "Leslie," she replied, noticing that the boy was scrutinizing her stomach. "Do you have a baby in there?" he asked. "A baby," answered Leslie, putting her hands on her stomach. "And who?" "Cody." Aunt Maria yelled at him. "Don't ask questions." "It's nothing," said Leslie and smiled at the boy. "I have a little girl in there. Can I play with her when she's born?" "Here's an idea. You better go have some strawberries while you sing." Aunt Maria handed the child a basin, and he grabbed it and ran out of the house, almost knocking down his mother, who had just entered the house. "Hi, Mommy." A tall, pretty woman with brown hair walked up to Aunt Maria and pecked her on the cheek. "Mmm." She closed her eyes, inhaling the flavor of the pie. "My favorite pie." "Hi, Sarah. It is. Almost done. Why don't I introduce you to Leslie?" Leslie realized that Cody was not William's son, and his mother was not his wife, but his own sister. For some reason, it suddenly became very happy from such a truth. "Leslie, my daughter Sarah, I'd like you to meet her," said Aunt Maria. "Nice to meet you." Sarah gave Leslie a friendly smile. "And me," said Leslie with a smile. "Where is William?" asked her daughter Aunt Maria. "He and Uncle Steve went to the summer kitchen to sort out the groceries and barbecue." Aunt Maria took a pie out of the oven. "It's beautiful. Now we'll put the samovar on and go to the gay's boat to drink tea," she said. When they left the house, Leslie was nervous when she saw Uncle Steve and William at the grill. Her arms and legs even shook a little when he looked at her. "Hello, Leslie," he said. "Hello," she answered, and for some reason her heart started to beat like it was going to jump out. "William, Steve, let's have tea. Then the kebab," Aunt Maria commanded. "Shish kebab first and then tea?" William asked. "By the time the kebab is ready, we'll all starve to death, and the pie's just out of the oven." "All right," William agreed. Everyone settled down at the big wooden table behind the house, and for some reason Leslie kept thinking about William, or rather about whether he had a girlfriend or a wife. "Stop," suddenly she said to herself. "I'm thinking about the wrong thing. Even if he has no one, which is unlikely, she is certainly not a candidate for a life partner. So there's no point in dreaming about unrealistic things," she told herself. But when it was time to go to sleep, she lay down on the bed and closed her eyes, and for some reason she saw him. Leslie realized that she had been thinking about William all evening, and had often thought about him since their ridiculous encounter. Of course she liked him, it was stupid to deny it, but it was better to switch to something else, and put him out of her mind. The next day after breakfast, they went to the lake, and Leslie even swam a little. The entrance to the water was gentle. Then there were kebabs, and after lunch she took a nap. When Leslie woke up, Aunt Maria and Sarah were working on the beds, Uncle Steve was chopping wood, and William and Cotty were gone. Leslie left the house and went to help the women in the vegetable garden, but they told her to rest, and they would manage on their own. Soon William arrived. It turned out that he and Cotty had gone for a ride on the ATV. Leslie suddenly wanted to ride it too, especially if William was driving. She shook her head, trying to wake up from this obsession. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Leslie left Aunt Maria's cottage with Bones. "Isn't it blowing?" he asked. "The window can be covered." "No, thank you. On the contrary, it's so nice," Leslie replied. They drove most of the way in silence, and Leslie looked out the window at the forest and fields changing each other. She wanted to talk to Kostya about something, but for some reason she was afraid to start a conversation, because maybe he didn't want to talk to her at all. William drove Leslie to the driveway and helped her out of the car, handing her a bag of berries that Aunt Maria had given her. "Goodbye," he said before getting into the car. "Goodbye," Leslie replied, a slight smile touching the corners of her lips. When she got home, she immediately went to the window. She had just closed the door behind her parents when Aunt Maria called her and told her that William was coming over in about an hour to drop off some berries and a piece of blackcurrant pie. Leslie lay down on the couch and turned on the TV. She flipped through a few channels and found some domestic melodrama and decided to watch it until William arrived. It was just under an hour later when she suddenly felt warm water running down her thighs. Ouch! She looked down at her soap breeches, and after a little while she regained consciousness. She changed her clothes and called her parents, who were about to rush back to her daughter's house. "Don't, Mom," she said. "What are you writing now? I'll call you when I'm in labor, and they won't let me in the room anyway." "Come on, I'll call an ambulance." But before she called the ambulance, she dialed Jacob's number. He was the father of her baby, so she thought she should let him know she was going to have the baby. "Leslie, I'll be sure to stop by the birth center the other day," he said. "You go ahead and call an ambulance and then text me when you're in labor." "Okay. You better text, not call." "Okay." Leslie grinned bitterly. Jacob obviously didn't care about her or their daughter. The doorbell rang, and she remembered that William was supposed to drop by to deliver the berries. "Is everything okay?" William asked, noticing that Leslie was definitely worried about something. "Not really. I have to go to the hospital," she said worriedly. "William, I'm sorry, but I need to call an ambulance." "I can drive you." "Go ahead," he said. Leslie had packed everything just in case a week ago, and the bag with the necessary things was in the hallway. "I'm ready," she said. "Great. Let's put the berries in the freezer, and you can take the pie with you." Sure." Leslie took the bag of berries and put it in the freezer, and William took her bag. 5 minutes later, they were outside his car. Which maternity hospital should we go to? He asked, and Leslie dictated the address. William stopped the car in front of the waiting room and helped Leslie out. Thank you. She thanked him and reached out to take her bag from him. I'll walk you out. Come on. I'm fine. No need. Thank you. Don't fight. William took her under his arm and led her to the door. Leslie was sent to the exam room, and William waited for the nurse, who showed up about 10 minutes later. You can go home now, she said. Your wife's been admitted to the prenatal ward. What does that mean? William asked. No contractions yet. Don't worry, everything's fine. There's a paid room available today. Would you like to take it? Come on, William answered in confusion. The nurse called someone, saying that they would come to pay for the room, and then turned to William. Go to the right and straight ahead. There will be a postpartum room. Tell the guard to pay for the charge, and he'll show you where to go. Thank you, said William, and went where the nurse said. On the way, he thought about Leslie's ex-husband, wondering how he could be such an asshole to leave his pregnant wife. He should be here with her right now, but the bastard didn't give a damn about her or his own child. Leslie's contractions started a couple hours after she was brought to the prenatal ward, and she didn't give birth until 6 in the morning. The labor was fairly quick and easy, and she finally got to see her baby girl. There must be some mistake, said Leslie when she and her daughter were brought to the charge room. There's no mistake, one of the nurses answered, but I didn't pay for it. Well, then one of your relatives did. Get some rest. Leslie gingerly got up from the bed where she had been placed a few minutes earlier and took her phone out of her bag. There were a lot of missed calls. Her parents, Aunt Maria, and Uncle Steve had called several times. There was nothing from Jacob, though. The first thing Leslie did was call her mom to tell her that their granddaughter had been born at 6.5, asking if they'd pay for her room. It was unlikely, but still. No, my daughter. You know our finances are tight. Mom said, "Well, do you want me to come over?" Mom, let's do it tonight. I want to rest. Of course you do. What can I bring you? Don't bring anything. It's fed here, Leslie answered and then called Uncle Igor. Well, congratulations, he said. What did you name your daughter? Barbara, answered Leslie and smiled, looking at the sleeping baby. I've got Maria on the phone. Uncle Steve had barely had time to say it before Aunt Maria's voice rang through the receiver. Congratulations, Leslie. Come on, tell me what to bring you. Steve and I are already off to a low start. We'll stop by the store, and then we'll come straight to you. I was so lucky I sent William to you last night. Aunt Maria, don't be in a hurry. I want to rest, and I have everything I need, and they feed me here. I know how they feed in maternity hospitals. It's impossible to eat. Okay, I'll figure out what to bring. You get some rest, and we'll be there by 5 o'clock. Okay. Aunt Maria, did you pay for a room for us? She asked. No. We wanted to, but William beat us to it. Leslie felt her heart race. William. Of course he did it, she thought. After talking to Aunt Maria, Leslie decided to text Jacob. Your daughter was born today at 6'5", 53 centimeters, 3.4 kilograms. And surprisingly, Jacob called back about 5 minutes later. Hi, he said. Hi, Leslie answered. Listen, I'm not sure I can make it tonight. Probably not tomorrow either. Is everything okay over there? I'm fine here. I just told you that your baby was born, and I don't care if you come or not. Okay, no hard feelings. You know I've got a little boy. I've got a job. I don't get enough sleep. I'm like a zombie at work. No hard feelings. You want me to sympathize with you. Don't be sarcastic. I gotta get back to work. I'll call you later. Leslie grinned. He hadn't even asked her name. She'd lived with Jacob for 7 years, and how she'd been able to ignore that he was a shitty person, Leslie didn't understand. Leslie didn't get to nap for long because Barbara cried for food. Leslie took her daughter in her arms and leaned her against her breast, but she immediately stopped talking and closed her eyes, suckling against her mother. How small and defenseless she is, Leslie thought, gazing at her daughter. When Barbara had had enough to eat, Leslie carefully put her back in the cuvette. As she did so, there was a knock at the door. Leslie quietly went to the door and opened it. William was standing on the doorstep of her room. How are you doing in here? He asked, peering into the room. Thank you, we're fine. Come in, she said, inviting him in. Can't we start talking to each other now? He asked as he approached the cuvette and Leslie nodded in agreement. She's so tiny. William smiled, looking at the sleeping Barbara. William, thank you. I mean you for the room. How much do I owe you? The man looked at her disapprovingly. If I do something, I do it on my own accord and I don't charge for it. He answered a little roughly. I'm just embarrassed, because it's not cheap. Leslie mumbled, feeling her heart beat again. It's not your problem and don't worry about it. You've done enough for me. You let me stay in your house and I'm a complete stranger to you. Not strangers, considering your uncle and my mom are getting married. So you and I are practically related. Why don't you tell me what you and the baby need to bring? Nothing. I've everything. Leslie answered, and her stomach suddenly rumbled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten in a long time. Leslie felt terribly embarrassed by the sound and a blush appeared on her cheeks. When was the last time you ate? William asked her. Yesterday, she admitted honestly. I slept through breakfast and it's still 2 hours till lunch. I'll be right back. William left the room and Leslie sat down on the bed and wrapped her arms around her head, trying to stop the slight shivering in her body. No man had ever had the same effect on her as William. She was always very tense and agitated in his presence. William returned 15 minutes later with a package in his hands. He walked over to the table and began to lay out its contents. There is a cafe on the first floor and the food there is quite normal, he said. Have some. Thank you. Leslie sat down at the table and began to chow down on chicken broth, then mashed potatoes with beef stew and a vitamin salad. She really was so hungry she hadn't even left a crumb. That's better, said William. You need to eat well now, don't you? I know I do. I just haven't had time to eat. Oh, okay. I'm gonna go and you get some rest. I will. William went to the door, but before he could get out, Leslie called him and he turned around. Thank you again for everything, she said and smiled, and William smiled back at her and left the room. Leslie slept intermittently, and around 5 in the evening, her parents and Uncle Steve and Aunt Maria came to visit her. Where did you get all this stuff? Leslie gasped, looking at the bags of food her family had brought. I don't plan to stay here for a month. Not so much there, but all useful. Aunt Maria answered and went to put everything in the refrigerator. Did John show up? Asked her mother, and the smile immediately fell off Leslie's face. I told him, and whether he comes or not, I do not care, she answered dryly. What a parasite, Leslie's father said. We have such a wonderful day today, and you talk about parasites, said Aunt Maria. Tanechka needs only positive emotions, so let's talk about something more pleasant and useful. I agree, said Uncle Steve. Leslie Maria and I would like you to stay with us after your discharge. Uncle Steve, I was planning on going to my house. We'll just be in the way. Barbara won't let you sleep. You won't be in our way, said Aunt Maria. So she won't let you sleep? Is it better to sit alone in your little room? We're always here to help, and yet I do not want to embarrass you, answered Leslie. Don't be ridiculous. There are 6 rooms in the house. She will. Stop being modest and arguing with your elders. Steve and I insist. Leslie knew it was useless to argue with Aunt Maria, so she agreed, but only at first. John never showed up, but William visited Leslie every day. He didn't come for long, and Leslie waited for him with bated breath each time. Her parents and Uncle Steve and Aunt Mary never left her for a day. There were no health problems, so they were discharged from the hospital on the 4th day. William and her parents came to meet them, while Uncle Steve and Aunt Maria stayed at home to get everything ready for the new residence. Leslie felt very happy, because so many people surrounded her and Barbara with care and attention. There was of course a very awkward moment when William was handed the baby and congratulated on the birth of his daughter, but he did not object, and giving Leslie flowers, took Barbara in his arms. By their arrival, the table was set, the house was decorated with colorful balloons, and the room on the first floor was completely transformed into a nursery. Seeing all this, Leslie was so moved that she could not contain her emotions and cried with happiness. Wet Kingdom is not divorced, and sit down at the table, Aunt Maria commanded and put her arm around Leslie. Sit down while Barbara is asleep. We have prepared so much here, so sing properly. Wiping away her tears of joy, Leslie sat down at the table, and William carefully put various dishes on her plate. Everyone smiled and toasted to the health of Leslie and her daughter, and Leslie felt very light and warm. Jacob called in the evening, when Leslie was feeding Barbara again. Hi, I'm sorry. I couldn't get away. Tomorrow afternoon, I think I can stop by for a quick visit. What can I get you? He said. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Jacob, you can't stop by tomorrow. I'm not in the hospital anymore. We were discharged today. Leslie answered. She didn't want to see Jacob tomorrow or ever. I'll stop by your house. I had to take the day off, and I couldn't find the time. You can't go home. I'm staying with relatives. What in-laws? Her ex-husband was surprised. At my uncle and his future wife. Your uncle's getting married. Oh yeah. What's he want at his age? Jacob grinned. That's none of your business, so don't come back tomorrow, Leslie replied rather sharply. I know you're upset with me, but let's act like civilized people. I'll come to my uncle's house tomorrow. Give me the address. It's his future wife's house and you won't be welcome here. Why did I take the day off? Jacob was angry. How am I supposed to see my daughter? You won't be welcome. You're making an enemy of the people out of me. Suddenly you wanted to see your daughter? I was in the hospital for 3 days. If I wanted to see her, I would have. I didn't have time, I told you. If you want to, you'll find the time. Here we go. How much longer are you gonna be mad? Anyway, Leslie, let's figure out a way to meet tomorrow, because then I don't know when I can get away. And don't be mean to me. No one's being mean. I thought I'd take her for a walk in the garden in the morning, if you want to come and keep her company and see her daughter, but I won't invite her in. Not even tea? You're mean, Leslie, and vindictive. Uh-huh. Tell me where to go. Leslie did not say the exact address, but only named the garden and the street where Lucy's house stood, and it was a 15-minute walk from Aunt Maria's house. Leslie was surprised at John's punctuality. He was already at the appointed place when she got there. Hi, he said and looked into the stroller. What's the name? Barbara, Leslie answered. That's a beautiful name. We named our son Dominic. Can I have my last name? No, my last name. Leslie didn't change her last name when she married Jacob because she didn't want to redo a lot of paperwork. Okay, what I was gonna say is, Leslie, there's a lot of expenses right now with the mortgage on your apartment and the baby and the other things. Why don't you hold off on the child support until Anna goes to work? Jacob looked at Leslie, hoping that she would understand how difficult this was for him. That's how it is. Leslie grinned. And your daughter has a lot of things to do, and I'm not going to work for a while. Did you think of that? I don't mean anything from you, though. And you know what, Jacob? I'm gonna put my daughter in my name and put a dash under paternity. It'll be better for everyone and less trouble for you. Leslie blurted out. Why are you freaking out? I wanted to talk to you like a human being. I'm not giving up on my daughter. I'll help you, but only a little later. Don't, Jacob. I'm not alone. I can provide for my own child. And why would Barbara want a father she'd only see once a month at best? I can't cut in half. Anna doesn't like that we're talking to you. I came today without telling her that I took the day off. It makes me neither hot nor cold, and I don't care about you or your Anna and your problems. Let's do what I say. Give up the baby? That's right. You don't need her anyway. That way you won't have to tear yourself apart. It's not right. Jacob's been thinking. How long have you been right? You're not even here now because you want to see your daughter, but because you're only concerned with your own problems, and you're discussing them with me as if I'm interested. You're making a monster out of me. You're like an angel in the flesh. By the way, good wives don't leave good husbands. I'm not your wife anymore, so don't try to hurt or offend me. It doesn't affect me. Go home. I think we're done talking. Suit yourself. Don't ask me for anything later. It'll be too late. I won't, don't worry. Leslie turned and walked away from Jacob. He disgusted her, and she wondered again how she hadn't noticed for 7 years that he was so rotten. Jacob silently got into his car and drove away, browbeating his ex-wife and wondering why all women were so bitchy and mercantile. William stayed at the cottage and worked on his laptop in the kitchen. Sarah and her son and Aunt Maria and Uncle Steve went into town, and Leslie went out to the vegetable garden to pick berries. After picking a basin full of strawberries, she returned to the house and heard Barbara crying. But no sooner had she reached her and her daughter's room than she saw William rocking her daughter in his arms. I'm sorry. I didn't hear her crying in the vegetable garden, said Leslie, taking the baby from him. She felt bad for distracting him from his work. Leslie, haven't you noticed that you're always apologizing to me and thanking me for every little thing? A baby cries. It's not a big deal. It's just that you're working and there's noise, she said quietly. I'm almost done, and Barbara's not bothering me at all. Stop apologizing for everything. Barbara fell asleep again after Leslie changed her diaper and rocked her for about 10 minutes. Let's go and have some tea, said William to Leslie, and she silently followed him into the kitchen. I wanted to ask you, when are you going to go to the city to get the birth certificate and registration for Barbara? In about a week or so. Why? Leslie was a little surprised by his question. I'll have to leave there for 3 days, so tell me when you're going to go, so I can adjust my plans and take you there. William replied, If you can't make it, Uncle Steve will. You don't have to change your plans for us. William leaned back in his chair and sighed. Well, you tell me what date, I'll take you. Okay, Leslie realized that he didn't like her previous answer. Do you want to go for a walk? He asked. Yes, I wanted to after I picked berries, she answered. Leslie smiled. I'm really glad Aunt Maria threw that mud on me back then, she admitted, and William laughed. Well, I guess you weren't very glad at the time, he said. That's true, Leslie replied, remembering that day. And then she and I met again when I was standing at the bus stop, wondering how I was going to cram myself into the bus. It was fate. William looked at Leslie, and she saw something in his gaze that she couldn't explain, but it made her soul tingle. Aunt Maria thinks it's no accident either, Leslie answered. Don't you think so? William asked. Maybe. One time you can write it off as an accident, but the second time. Doesn't the ex-husband ask you back? William suddenly asked. Who's expecting him back? He doesn't need us. And you don't need him? And we don't need him either. He came to ask me not to collect child support for a year. Leslie grinned. I'm going to put Barbara in my last name, and I won't list him as the father. I don't want anything to do with that man. Are you mad at him? More at myself because I was so blind, I didn't see who I was living with. We can all be blind, William answered, and Leslie noticed that his face became serious, and he seemed to be immersed in some memories. William, why aren't you married? Leslie couldn't stand it. It was a question that had been on her mind for a long time, and now it was coming out. I was divorced not so long ago, he answered calmly. Of course, Leslie wanted to know why, but she had no right to ask, because it was none of her business, and it was not good to poke your nose into someone else's private life. William wasn't going to go into details. Shall we go to the lake? He asked. We could, she answered. They talked about distracted topics without touching each other's private lives, and Leslie felt so good next to him that she didn't want their walk to end. They came to the lake and sat down on the shore. I'd like to go swimming now, said Leslie. She wished she had worn a bathing suit. We can come here again later, then you can swim, answered William. Inside, Leslie shouted, hurrah, 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 and her soul was filled with a feeling of happiness just from the fact that he was sitting here next to her. Now she was suddenly able to finally realize and admit to herself that she was in love with William. She was in love in a way that she had never been in love with any man before. Then Barbara suddenly started to rattle and whimper, and Leslie returned from heaven to earth. In the evening it rained, so the bathing had to be canceled, and the next day William went to town, which upset Leslie. Why are you so sour this morning, Leslie? Aunt Maria asked her at breakfast. Didn't sleep well? No. Barbara slept well tonight. I'm just sad, Leslie replied, picking at her plate with her fork. Well, here we go. Nothing happens for nothing. Everything happens for a reason. What happened to you? Aunt Maria looked at her point blank, and Leslie thought she was going to read her mind and realized that she had a crush on her son. And that would be it. It would be the end of their beautiful relationship, because it was one thing to be friends and another to be a daughter-in-law. But she thought Barbara would grow up without a father, so she got sad. Leslie said the first thing that came to mind. Don't be so pessimistic. Aunt Maria frowned. Don't anger the universe with that attitude. I'll try, Aunt Maria, Leslie replied. Can I help you with the garden? Cody and Sarah can help me. Aunt Maria looked out the window. My bees. They're already working. Sarah and her son were already harvesting. You go to sleep or do your own thing. What business, Leslie thought. She lives here like a princess on everything. They don't let her do anything, only send her on vacation. She picked up the phone and called Lucy. Hi, new mommy. I was going to call you today. She answered cheerfully. This weekend we are going to the cottage and we are waiting for you and your cozy Avaka at the visit. I bought you so much stuff. Hi, of course we will. You shouldn't have bought so much because we've already been gifted from all sides. Oh, that's okay. We'll need everything. Did you see your daughter? I did, but I didn't really look. I don't want to talk about him. Leslie said no. And we won't, especially since I found you a fiancé. Lucy said cryptically. Are you kidding? Asked Leslie. Not at all. Listen to me. His name is Logan. He works as a mechanic, has his own place and car. 37 years old, was married, but not for a long time. His own children cannot have. So looking for a woman with a child. I'll send you a photo. What do you say? You do not need to discount anything, answered Leslie. And I'm not going to meet Logan or anyone else. Why not? Lucy was surprised. It's because I managed to fall in love, Leslie confessed. Wow, Lucy gasped. When did you manage to do that? Who's the lucky guy? William. Oh wow, Lucy gasped again. So what? So what? So nothing. What about him? He's nothing. Nothing at all. We went out yesterday. That's it? Not really. Lucy, he drove me to the hospital, paid for my room, came to see me and Barbara every day, picked us up from the hospital. They handed Barbara to him, congratulated him, thought he was her father and my husband. It was so embarrassing. Leslie, are you cuckoo? Why am I cuckoo? No man would do all that stuff if he didn't care about the woman. You think so? You're so cuckoo. Use your brain. He's just a good man. I needed help and he helped me. Just what? You think he likes me? Of course he does. It's obvious. Then why isn't he taking any action? Hello? Isn't action enough for you? He doesn't say he wants to be with me, that he loves me. Say it first. He's already shown you that. What if I say it and he... No, Lucy, I can't go first. Barbara woke up and cried. Barbara's awake. She needs a diaper change, said Leslie. I'll call you back. She couldn't get Lucy's words out of her head. Leslie remembered the way William had looked at her during the walk. It had seemed to her that he had looked at her in a special way. Maybe he really does care about me, she thought and smiled. What's the matter with you today? Aunt Maria asked Leslie when they were alone in the kitchen. Uncle Steve had gone to stoke the bathhouse, and Sarah and Cotty had gone to visit the neighbors. Eh? Leslie was so thoughtful, it was like she'd gone into a parallel reality, disconnected from this one. She's been sad and brooding all day. Is something wrong? Aunt Maria asked. No, I'm fine. Leslie smiled. You don't want to talk? Aunt Maria, really everything is fine and nothing happened. All right then. Tomorrow by what time do you have to be in town? In the afternoon, Leslie got a call from the pediatric outpatient clinic and was told that tomorrow at around noon, a foster nurse would come to see her. Well, I think we should leave at 11:30. Uncle Steve's driving. William will drive her and then he'll bring her back. William? Leslie was both surprised and delighted at the same time. Yes, he's coming and he'll take you back tomorrow. He's got business in town, so he can go either way. We've really exploited him, said Leslie. Yeah, we did. You didn't exploit anybody. Leslie, his father and I have tried to raise our son to be a real man. Of course, William has flaws, like everyone else, but we succeeded, especially since he is very similar to his father. And Kirill was a man with a capital letter. It was like living behind a stone wall with him. It is normal to help someone, especially if that someone is a woman or a child who needs help and care. Maybe I just haven't met anyone like him, Leslie replied. There aren't many like William, but there are plenty of men like your ex, although there are plenty of women. William was married, and Cheryl was all sweet, and they looked so happy, but she turned out to be a real piece of work. When they got married, they lived in my apartment, and I moved here, and I've been living here ever since. Cheryl wanted a career, and so did William, and it's not a quick process to build a career. Money was tight at first, so they lived modestly. They lived together for 3 years, and then Cheryl got pregnant. William did not say anything and made a secret abortion, and he found out a few months later. And that was the end of their marriage. Couldn't forgive? Leslie asked. Maybe you could forgive, I don't know. But how can you trust her after that? How can you make such decisions alone when you're married? They had a child together. And William's career had just taken off, his project was chosen, those new buildings, one of which was his apartment. And then 2 more projects were approved at once. He was on a business trip to work on one of them. So Leslie, you kept the child, despite the fact that your husband left you, and some people with a good and loving husband have abortions. Aunt Maria sighed sadly and looked out of the window. And there's William coming, she said, and went to meet her son. At last she had found out what she wanted to know, Leslie thought. She didn't understand women like Cheryl, and imagined how hurt William was by such an act of a loved one. Soon Aunt Maria and William came into the house. "Hi," he said to Leslie and opened the refrigerator. "I'm starving." "Hi," Leslie replied. "Sit down at the table. Everything's in the oven. I'll heat it up." Aunt Maria said, "I saw there's a bathhouse coming up. Are you coming?" asked William. "Sure. First the girls, then the boys. And tomorrow Leslie and Barbara need a ride to their house. The nurse is coming." "No problem. I'll do it." Leslie looked at William and thought how stupid Cheryl was. She didn't know him that much, but it was enough for her to realize that she never met a better man in her life, because there was no one better than him. If he had married her, she would never have betrayed him, would never have been mean to him. In the morning, right after breakfast, William took Leslie and Barbara to their house as promised. "I have to run an errand. I'll be back in about 3 hours and we'll drive back," he said as he helped Leslie carry the cradle with the baby into the apartment. "Okay," she replied. William left, and she went to the window. There he came out of the driveway, got into his car and drove slowly out of the yards. Leslie smiled a little sadly inside. She kept thinking about Alina's words about being the first to tell him how she felt. What if he didn't have any feelings for her, but was just helping her out of the goodness of his heart, because his mom and her uncle were getting married soon, and they would become one family? It was scary to admit her feelings. Being rejected? No. How you socialize after that? The foster nurse came as promised around noon. After examining the child and the living conditions, she took a brief look at everything and said that she would come back in 3 days at about the same time. Leslie was just about to go that day to get the birth certificate and registration done for her daughter. She thought she could do it all in one day. Leslie went to the window several times, looking for William's car. Not that she wanted to leave quickly, but she just wanted to see him, because when he was near, she was very happy, and her soul was warm and light. And so when she looked out the window once again, she saw a familiar car parked in front of her driveway. Her heart in her chest immediately beat more often, and a smile shone on her lips. Leslie looked out the window until the intercom rang. "How are you?" William asked, entering the apartment. "We ate, changed our clothes, and went back to sleep," answered Leslie. "Well done. Let's have tea. I've got some cake. You can have fish, can't you? Salmon pie." "Yes," Leslie answered. William took a good look around the apartment. Living with a child in a small room like this, he thought, it's not good to cook where you sleep. Leslie put on the kettle and took out glasses, and William sat down on a stool at the small kitchen table. "And how did the nurse assess the living conditions?" he asked. "She didn't say anything. I think it's all right. A lot of people live like that," Leslie replied. "After all, it's a separate dwelling, not a communal apartment. I don't like these conditions and I don't want you to live here," suddenly William said, and Leslie turned around and looked at him in surprise. William got up from his chair and came so close to her that she could feel his light breath on her cheek. Leslie was so nervous that she thought she was going to faint. They looked into each other's eyes, and Leslie could hardly contain herself not to declare her love for him and not throw herself on his neck. Looking into William's eyes, Leslie couldn't take it anymore. "I love you." It came out of her lips, and then Leslie didn't realize that she rushed to his neck or if he kissed her first. But her arms were already around his shoulders, and he was wrapping his arms around her waist, and they were kissing, pressing against each other. Their kiss lasted so long, and Leslie didn't want it to end at all. Her head was spinning, her heart was racing, and her soul was filled with a sense of happiness she had never felt before. But then Barbara rumbled, breaking their idyll, and they reluctantly pulled away from each other. "We need to feed her," Leslie whispered, still in William's arms. "Of course," he whispered back and touched his lips to hers again before releasing her to his daughter. Leslie fed Barbara and changed her diaper. The baby whimpered quietly again, and she walked over to Willie, who was sitting at the kitchen table, watching her with a smile the whole time. He sat Leslie on his lap and looked into her eyes. "I don't ever want to part with you," he pronounced as he continued to smile. "You've been on my mind since the first time we met. I thought about you all the time too. William, I'm so happy right now that I want to cry. Leslie could hardly hold back her tears. Her feelings were mutual and tears of joy were bursting out. "What was that for?" he asked and pulled her tighter against him. "I love you so much that I want to cry." "Stupid." Leslie smiled, but a tear ran down one of her cheeks. "No," William answered and touched that cheek with the palm of his hand, gently wiping away the tear. "I love you too, and I don't want you to cry. I really like your smile, and I always want to see it on your face." "Good," replied Leslie, rewarding him with that smile. "Now how about some tea? I'm a little hungry." Leslie got up from his lap and went to pour tea. "Leslie, do you mind if we put me down as Barbara's father?" William asked as Leslie sat down at the table. "Would you really want that?" asked Leslie, glowing with happiness. "If I love her mom and plan to marry her and live with her for the rest of my life, then I would really like her to be our mutual daughter," replied William. "Of course I don't mind," answered Leslie. "Do you want to marry me?" Leslie could not believe that all this was happening, and she pinched her arm. "Very much, and quickly. You will agree to be my wife, won't you?" William rose from his chair and squatted down next to Tanya. He pulled a ring from his pants pocket, and Leslie gasped and covered her mouth with her palm. Tears ran down her cheeks, despite William's promise not to cry. William took Leslie's hand and slipped the ring onto her finger. "Is that a yes?" he asked in a whisper, and Leslie only shook her head in agreement many times before she whispered, "Yes," and threw herself around his neck. "I'm a little worried. How do your mom and Sarah will feel about us getting married?" said Leslie as they drove back to Aunt Marie's. "Do you doubt that they will be happy?" William was surprised. "Mama's been wanting me to get married for a long time. She and Sarah will be very happy." "Not everyone wants a daughter-in-law with someone else's child," Leslie blurted out. "Alien? Everybody loves that baby, and you're talking strangers. After all, at the birth center they gave her to me as a father, so I am her father," said William. Leslie looked out the window and couldn't believe her happiness. She thought about the fact that if she had not been abandoned by John, she would have probably avoided that puddle, and Aunt Maria would have just passed by, and then she and Costia would never have met. And if she hadn't agreed to buy that studio in the suburbs, there would have been no second meeting with Aunt Maria. Now it was even scary for her to imagine that these people might not have appeared in her life. When they walked into the house, Aunt Maria and Uncle Steve and Sarah and Cotty were eating lunch. William was holding a cradle with a sleeping Barbara in one arm and with the other arm around Leslie's waist. "Hello, folks," he said, "and Tanya and I are getting married." Aunt Maria choked on her soup, and everyone else put their spoons aside and stared at them. "Who tells people such news when they're eating?" Aunt Maria asked, coughing. "I'm sorry, Ma. I didn't think I'd shock you like that," William said. "Congratulations," Sarah said, and a smile appeared on her face. "Me too." Uncle Steve joined her. Aunt Maria got up from her chair and left the table. "Finally," she said and gave William and Leslie a peck on the cheek. "I've been waiting and waiting for you to get ripe." "What do you mean waiting?" Leslie was surprised. "I promised that I would find you a good fiancé, and I don't know anyone better than my son. And in general, I realized a long time ago that you will make a wonderful couple. And now I will legally become our Barbara's grandmother." Aunt Maria looked at the sleeping child and smiled. Leslie listened to Aunt Maria with her mouth open, and William laughed a little and shook his head. "Mama, you killed a lot of birds at once," he said. "Yeah, Mom is a strategist and not blind. Now put Mariashka in her crib and have dinner before it gets cold," said Aunt Maria. "I'm shocked," said Leslie when they came into the room. "And you were afraid that someone might be unhappy," answered William, carefully taking Barbara out of the cradle. "And I'm not surprised at all. She's my mom, and you can expect anything from her. You have a wonderful mother, and I adore her," said Leslie. William put Barbara in the crib and walked over to Leslie, immediately wrapping her in his arms. "And I adore her. And you and Barbara," he said and kissed Leslie on the lips. Leslie could not explain it, but with every cell of her soul, she felt that William was her man and thanked fate for the fact that she had united them, for giving her this happiness to love and be loved, for a beautiful and healthy daughter, and for Aunt Maria. After all, such a wonderful mother-in-law is still to be found.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.